Hey, welcome to ACF Podcast, where men share their incredible stories of God's grace and His relentless pursuit of our hearts. Make sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll be notified every time we upload a new podcast. We hope that you enjoy this story, and God bless. And we're here this week with Dave Swaney at Ashton Christian Fellowship Men's Ministry Podcast. And we're super excited to hear about your life, Dave. Thanks, by the way, for joining us.
Glad to be here.
And I got to ask you right out of the get-go, how old are you?
I'm going to be 80.
80 years old?
In May.
Whoa. And I don't want to jump too far into it because we're going to talk about it more on podcasts. How many of those years have you been walking with Christ?
Half of the time.
So 40 years walking with the Lord.
Yeah.
That is powerful. Mm-hmm. And 40 years living for yourself.
Yep.
So it's kind of cool because I feel like you're going to bring a really balanced perspective to this conversation. You lived half of your life for yourself, half your life for Christ.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot guys can get out of that.
Mm-hmm. Amen. And the 40 that I spent trying to please myself was a huge waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really our heart behind this podcast, is to inspire men to live for what truly matters. Mm. Because when we first start talking about this idea of this podcast, there's a lot of things there's three main things actually that we just feel like men always want, and that's power, sex, and prestige or money.
Yeah. And
the pursuit of all those things is hollow, though.
True. Very true. And it results mostly in pain.
Yeah. And then the funny turnaround is when you come to Christ, you usually find yourself being fulfilled in those three areas in a way that it was meant to be. Yeah. In a marriage that is honoring to God, and where spouses love one another, and a career that is fulfilling, and a purpose for your life that is meaningful and eternal. And
true.
Yeah.
If you decide to be married, because
that's true.
A lot of men are single because God has kept them that way,
or because they're ugly. Just kidding. Oh no, Brett, edit that one out. No, I'm teasing. It's true. I was just reading that passage the other day that some people are single for the sake of the kingdom.
Yeah. So, I was married, and I needed to stay married. Yeah. And so you heard our testimony at the Valentine's banquet a couple of years ago. So God helped us stay together. And we've been married 54 years now. Wow. So.
That's awesome.
Isn't it?
That is awesome. That's a great segue because we actually want to explore that story today.
Okay.
So I'm just curious, where did you grow up?
I was born in San Francisco, and we lived in that city for, I think, 3 years. And by that time, World War II was raging.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would have been that time.
San Francisco was a very busy war city just because there's so much military there. Not so much now, but in those days. And so my dad worked at a company in San Francisco and needed to be kind of within commuting range of it. So we moved to San Mateo. It's about 20 miles south. Yeah. And there's a regular train line that runs between San Jose and San Francisco. So he would, he'd jump on the train every day and go to the city, work all day, and then get on the train and come home.
And what was he doing again?
He was working for a tire company called Cyberling Tire. I don't think they're in business anymore.
Like car tires?
Yeah, car tires, yeah. And I'm not sure exactly what he was doing, but he was an alcoholic. Yeah. And, the familiar story. Yeah. He was getting drunk almost every day after work. Sometimes he would come home with his pay. Sometimes he wouldn't. Yeah. And so my mom really had to scramble. Yeah. And so he worked in San Francisco for a couple of more years, but when the war ended, he took jobs overseas involved in rebuilding some of the Pacific Islands that had been devastated
Yeah.
during the war. Guam was one of them. Another one was Kwajalein, and so he would go for a year over there and work. So I was basically without a father from that time on,
Wow.
because when he came back, he wasn't around,
Yeah.
and they divorced, and so I was living in a single parent
Yeah.
household.
Yeah.
My mom became a Christian, and her faith inspired the whole family.
Yeah.
And
How did she get saved? She just took you guys to church, or was it a friend, or?
well, she grew up in a Christian home
Okay.
in Weed. Do you know where Weed is?
Weed, California?
Weed, California.
Heard about it.
Yeah. And it's a small logging town. And so she, I think, she was influenced by
Yeah.
her parents in the faith. But she didn't become a Christian until, I think she was probably, I think I was maybe 10 years old or something like that when she became a Christian.
Yeah.
And but she would then drag us to church. The no excuses. You're going to go to church.
Yeah.
No staying home. And I mean, I tried all the tricks. Holding the thermometer up, under the hot water for a while to get it over 100, and all those kinds of things. But she wasn't.
Was that the
having it.
mercury thermometers?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So she wasn't having it. So we had to go to church, and so I got the gospel,
Yeah.
but I didn't like it. It was too restrictive, and it was mostly old people.
So it's kind of a legalistic church, a little bit.
Yeah, it was, and but eventually, she got a job with a ministry in Seattle, and we moved up there, and so it was like full-time Christianity.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, I want to pause you right there. So your dad and your mom divorced. You were around 8 to 9 years old?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
8 to 9 years old. So those first 8 years of your life, it was just a ton of pain then.
Yeah.
Mom's really scrounging. Dad's kind of out of the picture when he
Right.
is. It's not a good scene.
Right.
Do you feel like your home life radically changed when your mom came to Christ?
Oh yeah.
Like radically for
definitely.
the better?
Definitely. Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. But I resisted it just
Yeah.
because it wasn't what I wanted.
And are you the only child, or do you have?
No, I'm the oldest,
Okay.
and I have 2 brothers and a sister.
Okay, and they just go down the line behind you. Sister
Yeah.
being the youngest.
Right.
Okay.
No, it's actually my sister was next.
Oh wow.
So she was 2 years younger than me. Then another brother, 2 years younger than her, and then another brother 2 years younger than him.
Good
So,
timing.
yeah.
Yeah. So, did you feel a little bit like the man of the home?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, I was always encouraged to be.
Yeah.
You're the man of the house now and all that, but I wasn't buying it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want it. Too much responsibility.
Yeah. And one, the picture you had seen of a man of a home wasn't maybe the greatest one.
True. That's very true.
So you're like 11 years old now. You're in Seattle. Mom's full-time ministry.
I think by the time we got to Seattle, I was 14.
Okay. So it's been a few years. Mom's been walking with the Lord about
Yeah.
5 years, and
Right. And it was an interesting, very legalistic situation. It was a place called King's Garden,
never heard of it.
and it's now called Christa Ministries.
Okay.
And they've moved on now from what it was back in those days. King's Garden had been an old TB hospital where tuberculosis back in the day when they didn't know what to do with people, so they
Yeah.
put them away somewhere.
Yeah.
And so it was this great big campus that was a beautiful place. But living there was kind of, it was a challenge for me because it was so Christian.
So you lived on the campus.
We lived on the campus.
Was it almost cultish?
No,
Okay, good.
No, it wasn't like that. But the head of it was a guy who had built up first a kids ministry in Seattle, and they had meetings all over town with and I've forgotten now what it was called, but with teenagers, and was trying to keep teenagers out of trouble, keeping them away from drinking and smoking and all of that.
Yeah.
And so he had a very effective ministry. So this was kind of like the continuation of that.
Yeah.
And it developed into his dream, which was to have a school from kindergarten up through high school, a senior home where the old folks could live, a place where a radio station that broadcast all over the Seattle area with Christian radio. What else? What am I leaving out? I can't. That's about it, I think.
He had that all on one campus.
All on one campus.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So it was a big campus.
Yeah, it was a big campus. I think 40 acres, something like that.
Whoa. Yeah, that is a very big campus.
Yeah. So anyway, I was rebelling the whole time.
You're 14, hitting those years.
Oh my gosh, we got into so much trouble. My best friend was an off-campus kid. He came to school on the bus every day, and we became best friends. We met in Latin. We had to take Latin in our freshman year, and so we met in Latin, and we became really good friends. He went on to become the head chaplain in the Army.
Wow.
His name was Gaylord Gunhus. He was a major general, and he was based at the Pentagon. In fact, in 9/11, one of the planes crashed into the Pentagon.
Yeah.
It ran into his office. He wasn't there, thank God.
Yeah.
He was away on vacation, but he had to deal with all of that, all the people who were killed and injured and so on in his department.
Yeah.
And he's just a really cool guy, and we stayed friends even up until 5 years ago, I think, and he finally died.
With the Lord.
Mesothelioma got him. I don't know where, but it had something to do. He did 2 or 3 tours in Vietnam, and I think while he was over there, he contracted mesothelioma.
Wow.
So yeah, so we're still in touch with his widow, and as Christians, it was a totally different relationship that we had, and that was really
Because when
cool.
you were young, you guys were nothing but trouble, huh?
Oh my gosh, we used to steal cars.
Really?
Oh yeah,
Just joyride?
Yeah, just joyriding. Bad guys. We were just bad kids. But anyway.
Were you guys getting mixed up with alcohol and stuff like that too?
No, we weren't. Just didn't really even have a desire for it.
Yeah.
But our big kick was joyriding.
Yeah. Go get a car.
That was our high, I guess.
What was your favorite car?
Well, there was one that let's see, it was a Buick, like I've forgotten what the model was, but it was like a 47, 48 Buick, something like that. And the ignition in those things back in those days was rigged so you could use a key to get it started, or if you didn't have a key, you could just turn the ignition area, the whole thing would move, and you could start the car that way. So we learned that, and goodbye, we were gone, So, but even during my days in the rock and roll business, he would visit us. We lived in New York for a while, and L.A., and he would come and visit us when he was in town. And we maintained our relationship all through those crazy years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anyway.
So you're now 14, 15, 16, getting to the end of high school.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Because I had bad reputation as a rebel
On campus?
on campus, everywhere, everywhere I went. I was accused at one time of stealing something from a dressing room at a basketball game. I was on the basketball team, and somebody accused me of it. The police jumped on it, and next thing I know, I'm down at the police department being grilled and thinking I'm going to go away to jail. It worked out that they didn't charge me, but I was pretty bitter about that. And it resulted in me being kicked out of school in just starting my senior year.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And my grades were terrible. It was really a terrible school as far as the teachers were concerned and so on. I did terribly grade-wise in school, in high school.
Why was that? Was it just disinterested, focused on other things, or?
Like I say, the teachers were not that good. And I learned that by going to school where Gaylord was going to school at that time.
Who is Gaylord?
He's my friend who became the
head
of the Army.
That's right.
Chaplains. So he had moved to a school back in where his dad was from, back in Minnesota, and so he was going to this school. It was an amazing place. It was a Lutheran Brethren. It was one of the synods in the Lutheran Church. Tiny little synod. I think maybe something like 5 or 6 churches around the country. Some in Brooklyn, New York, some in Minnesota, and some in Pasadena, California, and one in Seattle. So anyway, he was going to school there, so I gave him a call and I said, "Hey, I just got kicked out of school. Can I come and go to school back there?" And he said, "Well, I'll see what I can do." And he said, "I'll call you." So he did. And next thing I know, I was on a Greyhound bus headed for Fergus Falls, Minnesota, this tiny little town just inside the Minnesota border from North Dakota. And I went to school there for I think it was a semester, actually. I went to there my last semester in school. And I found out that I had a brain, that I could do good schoolwork. Especially, I had to take physics, and I had no preparation for it at all, no earlier science courses or anything like that. But the teacher was wonderful, and he encouraged me, and he gave me hope that I could do schoolwork.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
So he had a big influence on your life.
Big influence, yeah.
I was going to say, because you're a super sharp guy, Dave. So when you said you didn't get good grades, I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, I just wasn't properly schooled. That's what it was. Up until I met Marty, this teacher.
Wow.
Martin, can't remember his last name, but I remember Marty. Just a super guy. And small classes, you know, that helped. So.
And I want to pause you there because it's a question we don't always get to on the podcast, but it's one I kind of want to explore is who were the men who had made an impact, a lasting impact on your life. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's so powerful is there's a lot of men in our body who are going to be listening to this podcast, who are school teachers, who are business people, who are in the workforce, in the police department, the fire department, and they don't maybe realize the potential they have to touch someone's life like you. And though Marty never got to see you walk with Christ, it made a lasting, eternal impact on your life.
Yes, he did. He did. Yeah, I never really got to know him much out of the classroom, but he definitely had a big influence on my life.
Yeah.
And on Gaylord's, too.
Was Gaylord a Christian at this point, or is he still, you guys are still just kind of rogue friends?
Yep.
Are you still getting in trouble?
Oh, my gosh.
Were you still stealing cars?
No, we weren't stealing cars, but in the school, it was all located in one building, like one four-story building, out in the middle of the prairie. I mean, and the weather, you can imagine, the snow and the wind, the cold, and oh my gosh. And this building, it was the school room down below, the school part of the building was on the first 2 floors, and then there was a basement, the kitchen and the dining room and all that was, everybody lived there. Everybody lived at the school.
Whoa.
And so it wasn't that big. I think there were maybe 150 kids, something like that. But where was I going? So I was it was boys upstairs, the boys' dorm on one side and the girls on the other. So the job was to get from the boys to the girls without anybody discovering you. And so there was a way to do it, but it meant crawling out the window and along a ledge about like this wide, about a foot wide, and across from the boys' side to the girls' side.
And hope their window was open.
Knock on the window and hope they were there, and yeah. But no, we.
How many times did you make that?
We did it maybe 2 or 3 times, really, and we didn't really want to try to have sex with the girls or anything like that. It was just a challenge. Yeah. To see, you couldn't, it was verboten to go to do that, but we did it. We had to show our rebelliousness somehow.
So you guys were kind of rebellious, but you weren't really into drugs or sleeping around or alcohol or any of that. Just more steal and enjoy riding cars, being dumb, having fun.
Having fun, the rumor was that if you could find somebody asleep in their bed in the middle of the night, and you could get a can or some sort of a jar or a container of warm water or something, and you could go to their bed and get their hand and put their hand in that warm water.
My mom's told me this.
And
they confess, right? They start telling all the secret things they've done?
No, they wet their bed.
Oh. Did it work?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I had it done to me a couple of times.
Did you do it to a lot of other people?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It actually works.
It actually works.
Makes you wet your bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got to try this. Coming to the church when the interns are asleep.
Don't tell them that I told you. Brett, remove that later.
It's on the podcast. It's too late, everyone. Years of experience right here. It works.
Yeah. So anyway, that was pretty much all of that I want to talk about when it comes to trying to think of the name of the school now. It's been too long.
That would have been over 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll think of it later.
So you've graduated high school now. What were your options for college? What was your next step?
I had no options for college. My grades were horrible.
Yeah.
I think I had like a D average.
Okay. Because one semester really isn't enough to get
No,
your grades up.
It gave me hope.
Yeah.
But it didn't change my grade points.
Yeah.
It was terrible. So I had no options for college, and I went back to Seattle and ended up moving to California to try to live with my father, who at that point was living in the LA area and had a fairly good job with a big aircraft company, Douglas Aircraft.
Oh, wow.
And he was doing pretty good. He was still drinking a lot and so on. And it didn't really work out for us to live together. So we tried it for a while.
So did you stay in contact with him then that whole time you guys were separated?
Not really, no.
So
I saw him a couple of times, but that's it.
So what gave you the idea to reach out to him? No options?
That was really the only chance I had in California. I wanted to go back to California. And didn't really like the Northwest much at all. Still don't. Sorry, people. But I think it's maybe the memories that I had there that were not that pleasant. So ended up in California, living near him, and I was overly ambitious.
Yeah.
I signed up at a junior college, Santa Monica City College, which was a great thing that they had in California. It was the 2-year college where you could get started and either get a associate's degree or go on to a 4-year college. But anyway, I was overly ambitious, and so I signed up for college. I was going to Santa Monica City College, and I was working at Douglas Aircraft in the evening. So I was working there full time and going to college full time.
Whoa.
Carrying a full load.
That's a full load.
Disaster.
Yeah.
Disaster. So in the end, some guys that I met at Santa Monica City College, and I opened a restaurant at the beach, in Manhattan Beach.
You started a business.
Started a business.
So you left working for Douglas.
Yep.
You left college at Santa Monica and you started a business.
Yep.
Whoa. With these guys that you met.
Yep.
Did they drop out of school too?
No, they kept going to school. One of them, primarily, and Gaylord, he came out from Minnesota and joined us in doing the restaurant. And we were just having so much fun. I mean, we were making hamburger patties by getting them started, rolling them into a bowl, and then putting them in our armpits to squeeze them down to flatten them out.
Just straight into your armpit?
Yeah.
And selling the patties?
And selling the patties.
Were people buying them?
Yeah, they didn't know. There was a secret sauce rumor going around,
The hidden flavor.
Oh, boy. Anyway, so we had a lot of fun, but then Gaylord got tired of it after a couple of weeks. He was gone. My other friend got busy doing other things. He was gone. And it was just me running this thing. And I had to do the whole operation from 6 in the morning until like 2 in the afternoon.
Doing it by yourself, did you start doing 2 pits at a time?
Yeah.
Squeezing out the burgers up in the production?
No, but it's a good idea. I should have thought of that. So that was it in the, it was called the Plush Donkey number 2, because there was a plush horse restaurant up and motel up in closer inland, and I've forgotten the name of the town now, but it was a kind of a takeoff on the plush horse. And so it was a 6-stool restaurant. That was it. But it was great for the beach.
Yeah.
But when the beach ended, school started,
yeah,
no business at all. It was terrible. So I was hanging out with a guy that...
Let me pause you for a second. How old are you at this point when you run your own business?
18.
You're 18 years old.
Yep.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I was living with this guy named Jim and his wife, and we were sleeping on the floor. There was no furniture. It was horrible. And he was into drugs. He was the first drug head that I'd really ever met, that I know of.
Yeah.
And it was pills. It was benzodrines and things like that. So I started using them, and I liked them. But I knew that it was wrong, and I knew that I didn't want to get hooked on these things and get into worse drugs.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like I came to a crisis in my life, my first major crisis. I said, what am I going to do? So God, I know now, guided me into joining the Army.
Yeah.
And I did that.
Was that the same time Gaylord was getting in?
Yeah, but he was going to college.
So he's going to be an officer.
Yeah. Yeah, he knew he was going to be an officer. And his dad had been an officer. His dad was a major. He was also a chaplain.
Oh, wow.
And he influenced him.
Yeah.
You know, and so he we were only a little slightly in touch now because I'm a little angry at him for bailing on the restaurant, and but anyway, we stayed friends, but not in touch.
Yeah.
So I go into the Army, and I end up being shipped to Fort Ord for basic training, and then from there to Fort Lewis, Washington, just where I wanted to be, right? In the state of Washington, back in the rain,
Back in the Pacific
and
Northwest.
the mud.
Maybe God was trying to show you something.
I think so. Yeah. So anyway, there I was at Fort Ord, and I ended up with in a section called G4, which was a unit that took care of all the logistics and supplies and that sort of thing for the Army. For the 4th Infantry Division was what I was part of at that time. And I replaced a guy who we became really good friends and really liked each other. And I was taking his place, so he was only there for a couple of months after I joined him. And then he was discharged and went back home to New York. And he had been groomed to be a baker all his life, to be not a baker in a donut shop, but a baker for a huge company called Continental Baking Company. They made things like Wonder Bread, right?
Did you teach them the secret arm technique to flatten it?
No,
Okay.
that
was a secret.
No. He was strictly on bread, but his grandfather was the head of the baking division of this company, and they made Twinkies, right? And the little donuts with the squiggle on top.
Yeah.
In fact, he had the patent on the machine that made that squiggle.
Your friend did?
No, his
grandpa.
His grandpa.
He's they must have been like millionaires because Twinkies still make money.
I know, but they weren't. But they were well off.
Yeah.
They were well off. So he had gone. My friend had gone to Florida State University as majoring in baking. And so he was well prepared, and his grandfather said, "Listen, you can take my place someday if you want to stick with it, but you got to start at the bottom in this company." And he said, "Okay." So he decided he would do that. So they shipped him to L.A., and he, by that time, my sister had moved to L.A. and was living with our father, and my father, and they eventually hooked up. My friend and my sister
fell in love
and got married.
What? Are they still alive?
He is. She's dead, but he's still alive. And their marriage ended in a divorce. 2 children, maybe 15 years later or so. Didn't work.
Yeah.
But his sister came to their wedding, and her name was Cynthia. And
This
that's
is
how
where
I
you met
met
Cynthia.
That's how I met Cynthia, his sister.
So you married into the Twinkie enterprise.
I know. But the only thing remaining of that is she got the recipe for making 4,000 loaves of fruit cake at the same time. And she had to break it down so that you could reduce it and make one fruit cake.
Is it pretty good fruit cake?
Oh, man. Yeah.
Dave, you got to bring it in. I got to try this.
Oh, you like fruit cake?
Well, I've never had one I've liked, but I'm willing to try.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
you'll like this. Was the Continental Baking fruitcake for years.
Whoa.
And it came out every Christmas. It did for many years. They're not doing it anymore. But
So what happened? Did that family get out of the company then, sell it out, or?
they, I think he eventually retired to Florida, and of course that's what you do when you live in New York and you're working. You want to retire, you go to Florida, right? And so, and they lived. I think he lived to mid-80s or something like that, and he passed away, and they were very close. Cynthia, he taught her how to play cards. You don't want to play cards with Cynthia.
Cynthia's a gambling woman?
No, she doesn't gamble, but we're talking about like gin rummy and things like that. Don't play with cards.
My wife's also really into cards.
Oh,
this
is
is what we
that
need to do.
right?
She's really into cards. Laura's super sharp.
Really?
Card games are her thing. We should get together, have fruitcake, and play cards.
Okay.
We'll make it a date.
That'd
be a lot of fun.
Let's do it. Okay.
That's crazy. So,
yeah.
wow. So even though it didn't work out between your friend and your sister, it introduced you to the love of your life. And you guys have been married, you said, was it 54 years?
54 years, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
And so life went on, and eventually, let's see, go back now. I got out. I stayed in the 4th Infantry Division, but at some point, I had the idea of doing a special publication that I would print up and sell to soldiers. And I ended up talking to a newspaper company in Tacoma, the next big city closest to the fort there. And turned out that they hired me to do some work for them. And I ended up doing newspaper work, and I was really enjoying it. I met John F. Kennedy doing this. And the publisher...
During his current term?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. The publisher had gone to school with him at Harvard and introduced me to him when he was on a tour going through Tacoma, stopped and made a speech. Ben Bradley was on the tour. Ben Bradley was the publisher of the Washington Post back in those days.
Whoa.
And got involved in the whole Watergate thing. He was one of the people who was deeply involved in that, reporting about it, writing books about it, and so on. The Washington Post guys, can't remember their names now, but there were 2 of them who really broke the Watergate story, and they worked for him. And he's in the book that they wrote.
So you are 20-something at this point?
Yeah, I'm about 21, I think.
Have you married Cynthia yet, or is that just...
No. We hadn't gotten that far.
we haven't gotten that far yet.
She's still going to college back in New York.
But you've seen her. You got your eyes on her. And...
Yeah. In fact, the Army put me to work doing newspaper work too. And they sent me back to New York to train in how to become a newspaper reporter.
So you didn't go looking her up, did you?
Oh, yeah. First thing I did. That's another story, but we don't have the time to go into that. Anyway, yeah, we spent a lot of time together, really a lot of time together, and it was hard to leave.
Yeah.
When I had to go back to Fort Lewis, that was really hard.
So how big of a time space was that?
So 6 months.
Okay. So you got to hang out with her quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit.
And you're mad in love with her.
And yeah, I was falling in love with her. And the first night I was there, she had a date with another guy. And he was going to West Point. He was going to be, he's going to have silver on his shoulder. And, I was just a guy with a stripe sewn on my sleeve. Right?
Yeah.
So I was, and plus, it was snowing like crazy. We were up in near where she went to school, and her mom was there. They had driven up together, and I liked her mom. Her mom was good people, and her mom and I had to drive all the way back to Yonkers, New York. It was like a 50-mile trip in the snow, getting her home. How we doing, Brett?
Oh, you're good to
Oh,
go.
yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought maybe you... Oh, I'm making too much noise with
Oh,
this.
yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, there it is again, Dave. Gosh. I have to reshoot the whole podcast now.
Okay.
I'm just teasing. So anyways, tons of snow, New York. Did you show up at the date?
No, I wouldn't do that, would I?
Maybe.
Me crashing West Point, I'd probably never be seen again. But anyway, so we ended up getting together when she got out of college. We broke up. We broke up, and I was working in Palm Springs, California.
So you guys got together, then broke up.
Yeah,
Okay.
got together and broke up. She was finishing college, had spent a year in Spain, a summer in Spain, and I was had a girl that I was dating, but I got fired from the Palm Springs Desert Sun for a newspaper for a story I wrote that was the demise of a big scandal involving marijuana. And the story I wrote kind of crashed the whole bust and embarrassed the newspaper and the police department and the sheriff's department and the drug people from San Diego. All this is going on. So the publisher and the police guy, chief of police, were good friends and played golf together. And so that was the end of my job.
So the article you wrote gave up the sting that the police had on the drug group?
Yeah, it told the whole story and how they had done it. And they really broken the law by doing this. And they never got into trouble, as far as I know. But I was asked to leave. And I was gone within hours. Packed my little Carmen Ghia and headed for L.A. So,
because you didn't want the drug people coming after you either.
No. But, I mean, there really wasn't much they could do legally.
Yeah.
They were in enough trouble already. But ended up looking for a job and finding one. The Columbia Records was looking for a PR guy. And I was kind of finished with doing newspaper work, so I thought the PR sounds pretty good. So I went to work for Columbia Records, and that was my beginning in the music business. Yeah. And so I was there for 7 years.
Wow.
And they liked me so much they moved me to New York and put me to work in the marketing department in New York. And I was working with people like, my first major project was the Byrds. And I worked with them, but they had their own PR man, a guy named Derek Taylor from London, who had worked with the Beatles. And the Byrds and the Beatles were good friends. And so I didn't have to do that much work, but the other jobs I was working on there was a group called the Rising Suns, who had a singer by the name of Taj Mahal. Do you know Taj Mahal?
I don't.
Okay.
These guys are way before my time.
Yeah, blues singer, just amazing black guy who's and the guitar player with the band was a guy named Ry Cooder, who was amazing. He played a dobro. Just like a guitar with steel strings.
Yeah.
And a hubcap in the middle of the
Brett and I just
body.
sold a dobro.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
How much did you make on it?
You have to ask Brett.
Okay.
But we didn't know how to play it, and the guy who bought it came and
And he
tuned it
showed
up
you how
and-
to do it?
Yeah, I played it with the slide.
Yeah. The,
It's a very interesting looking instrument.
yeah. Yeah. They're pretty rare, too, aren't they?
I didn't know that.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they ever made that many of them, but Ry Cooder was a great guitar player. He still is. I think he's still alive. Made a lot of really great music over the years. But I worked on him and a lot of other things too. Bob Dylan. I did a press conference
I do
with
know
Bob
Bob Dylan.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. I had a picture of it I was going to bring along, and I couldn't find it.
Of you and Bob?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it really changed my life
Yeah.
for the better.
Dramatically.
And Cynthia and I about the time I went to work for Columbia Records, she and I got married in a church.
Oh, wait. Pause. Because last time we left Cynthia, you guys broke up and she went to Spain.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you moved back to New York and fell in love again?
No, she came out to California.
Okay.
She came out to California, and she was looking for work, and
what she really was looking for was love, right?
yeah, yeah. And her brother, who was still married to my sister, and we kind of all lived together for a while, and it was really fun, really good. And so we got married, but as I got deeper into the music business and drugs, smoking dope, smoking a lot of marijuana.
It's really ingrained in that culture.
Oh yeah, I mean it's everywhere. So our life became a little more difficult.
Yeah.
And we were separated for a while, and it was
Cynthia's not a believer either.
no.
This time. Okay.
She had grown up in the church, and the church that she was going to, she really loved the pastor. He was a guy. This was in New York, but he was from the South somewhere, and he was just really full on. And he was approached by the women of the fellowship, some of the women of the fellowship, and asked if it would be okay if the Alcoholics Anonymous people could meet downstairs in the church basement one night a week. And he said, yeah, sure. Why not? And so, do you know anything about AA?
A little bit.
Yeah, it's sort of Christian.
Yeah.
If you want,
Yeah.
they'll help steer you in that direction. But basically what happened was that some of the people in the church did not agree with the decision he made, and they let him go.
I can't imagine the church never disagreeing or ever disagreeing.
Yeah, they disagreed. So that was it for Cynthia. Her last day before she went off to college, upstate New York, was his last day. And she never went back to church after that.
So she's not really walking with the Lord. You're starting to get into a drug culture. It's starting to cause tension in your marriage.
Yeah.
You guys are separated. How old are you at this point?
We weren't separated yet, but I was 26, 27.
Okay, so still a young man.
Yeah.
No kids yet or anything?
Yes, we had a child who was born about a year after we got married in New York. Samantha, our joy.
Aw.
Yeah. And so anyway, where was I? Okay. So we later got separated, but while we were still together, I had left Columbia and had started my own business in LA with a couple of other guys, doing PR for independent artists and companies. And when that didn't work out, I went back to work for Columbia Records. It was actually CBS Records at that point. But we started handling independent record labels, doing their distribution for them. And one of the companies had produced an album from a movie called El Topo. And if you ever see it, walk the other way, run the other way.
Gotcha.
It's satanic.
Yeah.
And I arranged for a screening up in San Francisco. In fact, I had an office up in San Francisco at that point, so I was kind of splitting my time between LA and San Francisco. And so I was showing this movie for the media there, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, it just blew my mind, this movie. And I had, after the movie, nothing really to do, so I went back to the the hotel I was staying in, the Miyako Japanese hotel, and I went in and thought, I need God.
Yeah.
I need God.
Yeah.
I need His help right now. And I went to my room and I opened the night table, and there was a Gideon's Bible.
Yeah.
And I opened it up and started reading. I can't even tell you what I was reading at the time. But all I knew is I felt safe then.
Yeah.
You know, and I was protected from the satanic stuff I had just witnessed.
Yeah.
And I got down on my knees and I asked God if He would take me back.
Wow.
And and then that was it. I felt so good. And that was where I accepted Christ for the first real time in my life.
Now you're close to 40 years old now.
And let's see. I think I was late 20s.
Late 20s.
Yeah,
Okay.
27, 28.
So you've been walking with Christ. Oh, but you don't count that as walking with Christ at the
No.
beginning. Okay.
Right.
But you're saved.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
saved. And the next day, I had to go over to the studio, and I was working with this group called my mind has gone blank all of a sudden. Anyway, I went over to the studio, and they were working on a new recording, and I went in and said hi and how you doing and what's going on, and they asked me what's new with you. I said I just accepted Christ. It changed my life.
Yeah.
From last night to right now. And it was like, okay, well, that's good for you. That's nice. They didn't know, what I was talking about, and didn't want to know.
How did that impact Cynthia when you came home and told her?
Good. Yeah, it was good. She was with me.
Yeah.
She was with me. And she wanted to renew her relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
You know, she had walked away from the church in a bad situation, and she felt badly about that. Ace Tubbs was the name of the guy.
Okay.
That her pastor in Yonkers, New York. Can you imagine a guy in Yonkers, New York named Ace Tubbs?
Met a guy in Brazil who was teaching English in this small town, 300,000 Brazilians, but it's very native. He was one of the few Americans, and I was one of the few Americans there too. But he was from Mississippi. His name was Buster Hale. It's really funny. Teaching English with a drawl. Trying to teach the students not to imitate his drawl.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was that, were you in Rio, or were you?
I was in Corumbá at the time.
Is that way out in the swamps?
It's
out
no,
west?
it's way out in the Mato Grosso do Sul, that state area.
Oh,
This is
okay.
like a drier jungle climate
Okay.
by the Paraguay River.
Is it? Oh, it's a dry area.
It was much drier than Manaus or other areas.
Like cattle.
There were
raise
some
cattle?
cattle, but I mean, what's dry for Brazil, right? I mean, it was still very wet, but not like Manaus or the Amazon or things like that.
Yeah.
But the rain would come in like it was incredible. Like lightning clouds would just roll in, and it would just thunder and rain for 5 straight minutes.
Yeah.
The lightning, and then also stop, and you just get super humid.
Yeah.
It was a crazy experience. There was like alligators on the side of the road and parrots sweeping across, and it was pretty amazing out there. Tarantulas, and it was a little more wild. It was a cool story.
Did you ever read, I can't remember the name of that book, Cynthia will know, the Grisham book, The Testament, I think it's called.
No.
It's a story about a lawyer in Washington his life is totally crashed. He's an alcoholic. And a friend of his is I think even a law partner. They're partners in this firm. They get this, it's a crazy story, I won't go into it all, but they end up, a woman missionary in Western Brazil has been left millions of dollars.
That's awesome.
And he has to go down and find her. Nobody has seen her for years.
Yeah.
And find her and tell her about this.
Yeah. It's like the Wild West, but the jungle.
Interesting story.
Yeah.
Interesting story. And he gets to this little final outpost little city, and he finds a guy with a boat, one of those flat boats, and they go up the river, and they find her. I won't tell you any more, but would you be interested in reading it?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I got some books I got to read, but I'd love to take a look at it.
Yeah.
I grew up reading books about the Amazon. My grandparents were missionaries there for 40 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my dad grew up in Brazil, and so it was like reliving their stories. It was crazy.
Oh, wow.
Going out there and going up the river, and it's quite the experience. I'm looking at our time. We got 20 minutes about left.
Okay.
And I don't know where Brett went. Brett, you still around?
He's over there.
Brett's over there? Okay.
Yep.
What I was thinking we would do is, your story is amazing, and there's a lot of content to your life, and you're the first of some of the older guys that we're going to do.
Yeah.
And we kind of figured it would take more time. I mean, unpacking 80 years of life is a lot.
Yeah.
But in this, especially this first part was super dense.
Yeah.
Coming to how you came to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you thinking, Brett? You thinking we could shoot his podcast in 2 steps? Does that sound good to you? Can't see you. Okay. Yeah, let's do that then. So we'll just, Brett might want to cut some of this out and edit it.
Yep.
So let's just do a wraparound question. We'll talk about you getting saved, all that, and then we'll just kind of give a preview.
Okay.
And just so you know, I'm going to ask you to share a couple things like what's coming next in your story, just to give guys a little bit of a hook. And then I'll probably ask you if you want to share something with men based on those first 30 years of life. What would you share? Mm-hmm. So I'll ask a wraparound question so Brett can cut to it.
Sure.
So you just...
So pause for a second.
Yeah.
So that I can cut good and then start again.
Sounds good.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. So you just came home. You got saved. You had this incredible kind of... I say incredible, but had like a really dark experience. But in that, realizing you needed God. Like there's more spiritual things to life than maybe you were willing to yield to before, and you see your need for God, and you get saved. You come home, tell Cynthia, she's stoked. As we're wrapping up this podcast, what did that mean for you guys?
It really set us off in a completely different direction. And pretty soon we were having a Bible study in our home.
For real, like you just got saved and now you're having a Bible study?
Well, not right away, but within months.
Wow.
Within months. In fact, the church that we ended up going to was a little kind of humble little church in the San Fernando Valley that was okay for a while, but after a while, the assistant pastor there was a professor at Pepperdine University, and he said, I think you guys need another church. And we ended up going to what was called the Vineyard.
Yeah, I know the Vineyard.
Yeah, and it was wild. I mean, it was a great experience because it was like Keith Green,
Yeah.
Bob Dylan was going to church there
Oh,
once in a
wow.
while, Debbie Boone, and it was, the music, oh my gosh, it was mostly actors, musicians, that sort of thing. And so when they started worshiping, the music was just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that set us off kind of in a new direction, and we ended up, one of my old partners' sister was working with a bunch of musicians who were traveling with Dylan. They were his backup band for a while. The Rolling Thunder Review, they called themselves.
That's a good name.
Yeah. And so they were coming over to study the Bible, but Cynthia was in a bit of a snit at the time. She was downstairs in our house watching TV and gritting her teeth about these people that were coming in for Bible study. She didn't want that. It wasn't part of her reality at the time.
Yeah. Because you got saved and she loved that, but she hadn't really been walking with God
Right.
up to that point.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a tension there. And Dave, we decided we're going to tackle your story in two parts because we don't want to miss it.
Okay.
So as we're coming towards this close, what would you encouragement out of that first 26, almost 30 years of your life leading you to Christ? What would you say to men out of that?
Can you ask me that question again?
Yeah. Because this kind of marks the point where your story changes.
Yeah.
You've been living for yourself up to this point.
Right.
But now you've met Christ. And already in a few months, you've started a Bible study.
Yeah.
And your whole world has changed. And we know Cynthia's world's going to
Yeah.
change here soon. What would you share with men out of that?
Yeah, it was a huge change.
Yeah.
I mean, it meant being flexible.
Yeah.
And doing things like I hadn't really bargained for, but were
When you got saved.
yeah, yeah, that were really exciting
Yeah.
and really amazing. I was really loving it.
Yeah.
I ended up going to Maranatha Music
Yeah.
and joining them and doing these wonderful Christian albums with great musicians.
And we're going to talk about those, by the way,
Yeah.
in the next one.
Yeah, next time. So it was very challenging, very exciting, it's the real life.
Yeah.
The other is a false life.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it going through it until I gave my life to Jesus and began to understand what the difference was in life. And he is the life. The other is fake.
Yeah.
It's a fake life.
Yeah.
To quote Donald Trump. It's a fake life.
Yeah.
So,
I'm looking forward to continue digging out your story.
okay.
So you're kind of at the season now where we're leaving you, where you're learning surrender.
Yeah.
And there's things that you hadn't bargained for, but you realize it's what you want.
Yeah. I think that about surrender, I think it's an ongoing thing. It never ends.
Yeah.
But you've got to learn that that's what you're going through.
Yeah.
You're giving up control of your life,
Yeah.
but it's a good thing.
And at the beginning of the podcast, you said you really only say you've been walking with God for 40 years. So there's going to come a point in our next podcast where you really are going to take that true step of surrender and say, God, my life is
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I can't wait to get
Okay.
into it. Dave,
All
thanks so
right.
much for coming on
You
today
betcha.
and letting us film you. And
When do you want to do
Record
this?
you.
This thing on a weekend? Again?
we'll keep doing it on a weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Our people will contact your people. Thanks, Dave.
I've heard that.